start recording, and we can give it another moment to see if anyone joins us. But if not, we'll get started in a minute or so.
I'm happy to hear that I was supposed to remind you to record because, you know, I know people who can't be here, who wanted to be here.
Yes, yes.
That's good.
Well, there's no one in the waiting room. I'll happily admit them should anyone join in. But I just wanted to welcome everyone to our first TJVillage program of 2021. I wanted to mention that TJVillage is a vibrant community of mature adults thriving independently together. That is our vision statement. And I wanted to welcome all of you to our program this morning. There'll be a few announcements when we're done, some upcoming programming. I hope that you've all had a chance to look over Rabbi Lezak's bio that was on our flyer, but I'm going to turn it over to proud mama and steering committee member, Sylvia.
Thank you. Thank you for all of you being here today. I'm excited, needless to say. And even if you've read his bio, I'm going to give you just a few highlights.
Just muted yourself, Mom.
Okay. So as I was saying while I was muted, thank you for being here today. It's an exciting day for me, and I hope it will be for you. And you'll be well informed about Michael and his work by the time he finishes. Michael was ordained in 1999 from Hebrew Union College in New York City. I will tell you that probably the most proudest accomplishments of Michael's life are his marriage to Rabbi Noah Kushner, and being the co-parents of my 3 youngest granddaughters, who are, you know, I mean, I could go on forever and ever, but I guess maybe I really won't. Let's see, Michael spent 14 years as a congregational rabbi in Marin County, and his rabbinate there included social justice work, where he made connections to the nearby prisons and taught the prisoners at San Quentin. And I'm not sure exactly what other prisons, but if it's important, he'll tell you. But he did a lot of social justice work before he left. And that really has always been in Michael's heart, very strongly in his heart. So in 2017, he pretty much made himself a job at Glide. I guess it was Glide Memorial Church in those days. I think it's just called Glide now. It's located in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. So any of you who know anything about the Tenderloin, it is not the prettiest place in San Francisco. But this church is a very, very, very liberal church, open to all faiths and healing. I think that's one of the prime things that they do there. They feed a bazillion people a year. I can never remember how many, but 3 meals a day, every day, 365 days a year. They feed people from the neighborhood. Let's see, and so, you know, besides faith, justice is another one of their prime endeavors at Glide. And that is where Michael is found, in the Center for Social Justice. So now it's up to you, Rabbi.
Good morning, everyone. It's not often you get your mom to introduce you. It's, you know, she is my main PR agent, and she comes pretty cheap. So I'm really, really glad to be here this morning. I know a lot of you on the screen, but not all of you. I hope this morning to tell you a little bit about my journey to being a rabbi at this amazing place called Glide. I hope when you all get vaccinated and you're safe to travel, that you come visit me here in San Francisco, and I get to give you a tour around, and we bake challah every Friday. Come have a glide challah or serve a meal with me, because I think it's one of the most inspiring and transformational places I've ever been to, and I feel radically blessed to be working there. Before I get started this morning, I want to tell you 3 facts, stories to like hold on to, just to anchor yourself in. And the first is that I run a weekly support group at Glide for Glide staff people with my coworker, a 70-year-old African-American woman whose title at Glide is the Maven for Transformative Learning. Her name is Isoke Femi. She and I run the support group for Glide staff. Last Monday, we were on with 15 people, including a woman, a 50-year-old African-American woman who's been incarcerated, had her kids incarcerated. And she shared with us that she had 14 family members die in 2020, 13 of them from COVID, right? 14. So you'll see very quickly that I see my work, I see my life, I think the invitation to the work through a racial lens. Building on that story about Sandra, she had 13 family members die from COVID last year. In my privileged white Jewish circle, I actually don't know anyone on my interior circle who died from COVID. The second story is this. In San Francisco, the population of the city 25 years ago, the city that was African-American hovered around 20% of the city was Black. Today, only about 4% of the population of the city is African-American. We can talk at points about where did all the Black folks go in San Francisco. You can watch the movie, The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which is definitely worth watching. But juxtapose the 4% of the population, overall population is African-American, yet 40% of our unsheltered population are African-American. The only place you can reliably find Black folks in San Francisco is in the Tenderloin, unsheltered, in poverty, wrestling with addiction in a very public way. And maybe the last story I'll tell, and you all know about the ritual about when a close family member dies. In traditional Jewish circles, people will tear their shirt. You'll see, I suspect many of you have been at funerals for family members where they'll put a black ribbon on and they'll tear that ribbon. That ribbon is called a kriya ribbon. The word kriya means to tear. And like when the death of someone comes, it rips open our heart. Excuse me, I need a little water. I'm thinking about like my American heart that is being ripped open. And I almost want like an American flag that is being torn apart by COVID, by the racial pandemic, by what happened on January 6th and everything we have seen in the past years. And I think our work Jewishly is to be sewers, to be weavers and healers, to repair wounds. And so maybe I'll pause there and then give you a little of my bio and my pathway into Glide. The holding on to Sandra, holding on to that 4 versus 40%, and thinking about the tear, and then thinking about how might we repair this breach. So I am Michael Lezak. I grew up at 24038 Oxnard Street in Woodland Hills, in a bedroom across from where my mother still sleeps. I grew up at Temple Soleil on Valley Circle. I played baseball and t-ball at Knapp Ranch Park. My parents moved over to Temple Judea before Judea ate Soleil, whatever year that was. I was confirmed. I spent 10 years at Camp Hess Kramer, and I was a marketing and international business student, undergrad, who never did one Jewish thing in college at all. And I had a heart for justice. My parents clearly did a ton of work at Judea and Soleil growing up that shaped me to become who I am. They brought in an Iranian Jewish man named Mandri Pouryamudini, who we called Henry, to live in a bedroom in our house for a whole year in 1980. And this is a man who was Jewish but spoke no English and we spoke no Farsi. But my parents knew from their parents' stories that Jews are often on the run, and they had the power and the space to bring someone in. And they taught me in that one move, in the 11 months that Henry lived with us, that redemption is possible. And I learned how to do it one soul at a time. I learned how to do that as a congregational rabbi of like building out relationships with one person at a time. And I now see that at Glide. Certainly there's systemic change, but there's also hearts and minds work on an individual level. I found my way to rabbinical school because a great rabbi named Alvin Mars saw in me a rabbi and suggested that back in 1991. As my mom said, I was ordained in 95, was a rabbi for 4 years in San Mateo, 14 years in Marin County. Loved my work as a congregational rabbi. And raise your hand if you've been to Marin County. You guys been to Marin, across the Golden Gate Bridge. We've got Muir Woods. You got some really good food. You can go kayaking in the bay, right? Amazing and beautiful. Well, about let's call it 10 years ago, I was taking the ferry past San Quentin, State Prison San Quentin, in a beautiful location that you can drive by on the 101, right on the bay. And I was reading a book called The New Jim Crow. The New Jim Crow is about racism in the mass incarceration system and talks about how laws are set up to incarcerate people of color much more easily than white folks. I can teach that class at a different time. So I thought to myself, ooh, I'm going past this jail. I've never been in this prison. About a month later, I got myself inside San Quentin. And I was teaching Psalm 118 to a group of 50 men who were on death row. And I had the most intense conversations I'd ever had in my entire life about life and about death and redemption and teshuvah and making amends in people's souls. And I looked at the room and I was kind of shocked. I was not surprised, I was between shocked and surprised at the racial makeup of the room. Marin County, you might know, is like one of the whitest counties in America. It's 85+% Caucasian. The racial makeup of the room that I was teaching was the inverse of that. It was about 70% men of color. And I realized that this new Jim Crow idea, the idea of that we incarcerate folks as people of color, which we knew was alive in Texas and Alabama and Mississippi, was alive here in my county. And that Rosh Hashanah, I stood up in front of 2,000 people at the Marin County Civic Center and talked about this. And I knew I pissed a few people off, and I don't mind pissing off a few people. Marvin Lezak was my dad, so if you knew him, you knew. He did that occasionally. My mom too. Full respect to you, Mom, okay? And I built out what I called the New Jim Crow Working Group, where we looked deeply at racism in Marin County, active systemic racism and individual acts. And we built out this group that read the text and went into jails and prisons around the Bay Area. And I still have a group that pre-COVID goes into San Quentin once a month and will go and post-COVID to celebrate Jewish holidays, to celebrate Shabbat with men who are incarcerated. There's a synagogue in the jail. And I can say to you, the work I did inside San Quentin rocked me to my core, and something came alive in me in a very powerful way. I knew I needed a new job at some point. I went to meet a woman named Stephanie Rapp, who works at the Haas Foundation here in San Francisco, and told her I wanted to look for something new. And she knew about my justice soul, and she took me on a justice tour of San Francisco. And I landed at Glide, which I'll tell you much more about in a minute. But in short, it is both an amazing church that has a 50-member gospel ensemble and a funk band called the Change Band that has 2 services every Sunday morning. You should go online and watch. Go on Glide's Facebook page every Sunday morning. My mom will give you the link if you need. And it is also a 7-story redemption factory that does unbelievable work of helping people heal from trauma in their life. And I'm like, I'm in the midst of this interview process and raising money, try to see if I can do this. And while I'm interviewing for this job, this is an absolutely true story, I go to see the band U2. Anyone know the band U2? Bono, right? So I'm seeing the band U2 in front of 70,000 people. I've got my 3 daughters there. It's finally, I've taught them some music that they like. And in the middle of a song called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Bono, the lead singer of the band, turns to 70,000 people and he said, let's turn this place, this stadium, into Glide, right? Let's turn the 70,000 person stadium into Glide. I want to give a very special welcome to the Reverend Cecil Williams, the 92-year-old Reverend who helped found Glide. And mind you, I'm interviewing when Bono says this, and I kind of look to the heavens. I'm like, maybe I should take this job, right? So I started at Glide in let's think about this, in July of 2017, without a job description, having no models of what the hell it would mean to be a rabbi at a church, let alone a foundation. I knew congregations, I knew bar mitzvahs and weddings and brisses and funerals, right? And Shabbos services and high holidays. And bit by bit, I took a very deep dive into Glide and into the Tenderloin. I had coffees and meals with hundreds of people who cook lunches and who are the CEOs and who run our meals program. And I just came with an open heart and really wanted to get to know the place. I give sermons at Glide, in the Glide Church. The first time I ever gave a sermon in the Glide Church, my mom, of course, because she's got a little bit of nachas for her son, was walking with me into Glide with my wife Noah on the other side. And I had a yarmulke on and I'm walking through the Tenderloin through homeless folks. And someone shouts, "Shalom Aleichem," to me. Now in this town, no one shouts Shalom Aleichem. The second story I'll tell from that morning is I'm sitting in the front pew of the church, getting ready to give my Devar Torah to the congregation, to 1,000 people at the church. And an Israeli woman comes to speak to me and starts speaking to me in Hebrew in the church on a Sunday morning. And she says to me, "Rabbi, Glide is my shul. I've been coming every Sunday morning for 20 years, right?" So I'm going to just throw a question to the Zoom room here. Why would an Israeli Jewish woman come to church every Sunday morning for 20 years? Anyone want to venture a guess? You can unmute yourself and give it a shot. Gail, give it a shot.
I'm going to guess that community held her and provided her with something she wasn't able to get anywhere else.
Absolutely, Gail. Anyone want to venture a guess what she wasn't able to get in a shul? Okay, here we go. Time is short. This one, Israeli Jewish woman, had been a heroin addict. Okay? She'd been a heroin addict. Now, I don't know about Temple Judea, but certainly every shul I've ever worked in, none of them knows what to do with a heroin addict. Okay? They're like, "Ooh, you get away, you smell, you look a little weird, your eyes are a little bugged out," right? Glide knew exactly what to do with her, to love her unconditionally right where she is, not to meet her where we want her to be, like get off of those weird drugs. We met her where she is, and we gave her clean needles to help keep her alive and keep her safe. And when she was ready, and when the ground was fertile, and she decided to make the decision she wanted to heal, she started to heal herself. And now she works with addicts at Glide, right? And a place that welcomes you in the moment of crisis like that will become your spiritual home. So I gave my sermon that morning. I, bit by bit, fell in love with this place, Glide, which I'll tell you about now. It's a 7-story building, and I'll walk you through the floors. On the basement floor, we have two dining rooms. One dining room for the general population and one for elderly folks, people who have disabilities, for families. And we feed on average 2,200 meals every day of the year, about 750,000 meals a year, hot meals, to anyone, to people who have jobs, but put all their money into rent. You see people in business suits with a nice suit on and a beautiful briefcase coming in for a meal at Glide. And you see people who are unsheltered or who are wrestling with addiction or mental illness. And sometimes all three of those, right? People with mental illness and a job and addiction and a beautiful suit need a hot meal. And we, on our ground floor, we have something called the walk-in center. If you have an open wound, if you need a shelter bed tonight, if you need mental health support, if you need a hot meal, the walk-in center is kind of a multi-purpose justice concierge that is connecting people in need on our street. On our second floor, we have our women's center that helps women who were hurt last night or 10 years ago or 30 years ago heal from their pain. The Women's Center also runs what's called our Men in Progress program, which historically helped men who perpetrated violence to unlearn violence, and now is helping women who perpetrate violence to unlearn violence. Moving up the building, we have an alternative to incarceration program. We have an alternative high school program for people who didn't graduate to get their GEDs. We have something called our harm reduction program. When I came to Glide, what harm reduction meant to my white suburban Jewish tuchus meant when you go out on a bike, put a helmet on yourself or put on a seatbelt in your car. Make sure you reduce harm. At Glide, harm reduction means that we think about people wrestling with addiction as human beings, not as disgusting, yucky people to incarcerate or to punish, but people who have an addiction. I can tell you, if you said to me right now, Rabbi Lezak, stop eating chocolate, I would throw in fits and tantrums. I asked, my wife to stop drinking coffee today, like there would be problems. Those just different kinds of addictions. So at Glide, our harm reduction program helps people who are wrestling with currently illegal drugs to stay safe. So we give out about 1.5 million clean needles every year. So that if I get HIV and I'm an intravenous drug user, and I don't share my needle with you so you don't get HIV. We test people's drugs for fentanyl to make sure that they don't overdose. We test people for HIV and Hep C because it is a lot cheaper to do this work than it is to incarcerate people and to revive them off the street if they overdose. We give out a drug called it's called Narcan. Anyone know what Narcan is? Right? It's an opioid reverser. If I overdose on heroin right now and I turn blue and I'm on the ground and I'm about to die, if you inject me with Narcan, it literally brings me back to life. Okay? My office is across the hall from the harm reduction department. The harm reduction saved 180 people who overdosed last year. They brought them back to life. Okay, those are mothers and brothers and sisters and daughters. And I'm not going to out anyone on this call, but I'm sure if you think about your family members, there are people in your family who are wrestling with addiction. There's a lot of shame associated with it. At Glide, we're just like, we're going to meet you with unconditional love wherever you might be, right? So that's Glide in a nutshell. I do 3 big things at Glide, and I'll tell you about the 3 big things I do at Glide, and then I think maybe we'll kind of wrap it there and see what kind of questions you have. The first big thing is I do outreach to the Jewish community, broad outreach to the Jewish community. Every Jewish day school from Palo Alto to Marin County, 8 of them are, when it was not COVID, were coming into Glide multiple times a year to get close to the worst stories happening in America today, I would say, of racial and economic injustice. I go out to their schools to teach them Jewish texts about why we should be engaged in remedying issues of poverty and thinking about racial justice. And then I bring them in to get close, to serve meals, to pack harm reduction kits, and to meet people who have been transformed by Glide. I could read you the letters from these kids, but I know that their lives are transformed. I'm in relationship with about 10 synagogues in the Bay Area who also come in regularly to Glide. The one that is most active is my wife, Rabbi Noah Kushner's congregation, which is called The Kitchen. Their religious school meets monthly at Glide, right? So they sit in a park or in a classroom and study Torah, and then we have them live Torah. We have these, kids serving meals, baking challahs, packing harm reduction kits. We had Shabbat morning services at Glide one morning, and I kid you not, in the middle of the Torah service, Curtis Bradford, who runs Glide's dining room at the time, Curtis McGregor, excuse me, came to me and said, Rabbi, a group did not show to serve meals this morning. I need 8 people in the basement in 5 minutes. I paused the Torah service at Glide, and I said, I need 8 people downstairs. And I had an 8-year-old and an 18-year-old and a 78-year-old and others go down and serve a hot meal to people in our town who are needed it. So we use Glide as like a justice classroom and a justice library to help the broader Jewish community come in close to Glide. I would say we bake about 200 challahs every Friday morning in the Glide kitchen. Stephanie Rapp, my main funder, who said to me, we should feed the people who feed people. When we think about Glide staff, a lot of the frontline staff did not graduate high school, did not have college degrees. Some of them are wrestling with addiction, had mental health challenges themselves, right? We feed them hot Jewish Sabbath bread every Friday morning, baked by members of the kitchen. And we've got one rule when we walk the hot challah out around the building, and believe me, a hot challah can change your life. And that is more butter than you think you deserve, right? May that be your motto every Shabbat the rest of your lives. More butter than you think you deserve. Here's the secret, okay? You put your challah, even if you bought it at Safeway or Albertsons or Ralph's, and I heard my mom told me Ralph's and Albertsons are going to be vaccinating you people. Let's get that done. Even if you didn't bake your challah at home, throw it in your oven at 275 for about 10 minutes, piping hot, or you pretend like you're a baker, then buy some very expensive salted European butter and put half the stick of butter on your slice of bread. You won't have a heart attack, okay? And it will change your life and it will fuel you until the next Shabbat, okay? We believe that that is one of the secret weapons at Glide of like, it's great Jewish PR for the Jews that the Jews are feeding people. And challah is not bad PR for us either, right? Maybe the last story I'll tell about our Jewish outreach is this. I was scheduled to give the sermon in the Glide Sanctuary the morning after the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, right? You all remember exactly where you were when you heard that news. Your trauma is connected to my trauma and fear. Most of you are older than I am, and you know active anti-Semitism much more than my privileged Valley-born Jewish tuchus does, right? So I stood up in front of Glide Church that Sunday morning, less than 24 hours after 12 Jews were killed in America by a white supremacist. And I said, the Jews love this place. The Jews love Glide. We've got 150, 200 Jews a month coming into Glide to donate money, to serve meals, to bake challah, to love you, right? This week, the Jews need you. You need to pick up the phone and call your Jewish friends and say you are not alone. That synagogue that you drive by or walk by, you need to walk inside and say, you are not alone. I'm right by your side. And this Friday night, I want to invite the entire congregation to celebrate Shabbat with us at the kitchen. The kitchen usually gets about 250, 300 people on every Shabbat. That Friday night, there was probably 400 members of the kitchen and about 300 people from Glide packed into a room that the fire marshal says should seat about 200 people. The entire Glide ensemble came to sing with us. And I thought in that moment, this is my vision for America. That long before there's a crisis in America, we've seeded relationships across the lines of race and class and religion and education, and we've fallen in love with one another. So that when crises do happen, we show up and we take care of one another. And I can tell you that covenant that we're building between Glide and the Jewish people gets deeper and deeper every week and inspires me in no way. So chunk one of the work that this rabbi at the church does is broad outreach to the Jewish community. Chunk two is a program I run called An Officer and a Mensch, okay? An Officer and a Mensch. I run a training for police officers and district attorneys from around the country, a 3-day immersive program at Glide and in the Tenderloin to help cops and DAs de-escalate situations nonviolently, to help them think about how they might be more compassionate in their work. The first morning I was running this program, I had the cops come out of uniform. I had them meet me in front of Glide at 6 a.m. And I say to them, I want you to walk around the neighborhood and imagine that this was your bedroom last night. And then I gather them an hour later in front of Glide and I say, you're going to wait in line for food right now. Imagine the Glide is your dining room, right? And you can't wait with your buddies. And I take their cell phones from them. And I just say, you have to get in a relationship with these people who actually slept outside last night and who were actually hungry and see them as human beings, not as people to be arrested, not as drug addicts, right? And as I'm standing in front of Glide, telling them this at 6 a.m., 3 years ago, homeless, clearly mentally ill guy walks by and sees me in my yarmulke and looks at me and he goes, in front of 20 cops, and he goes, man, I fucking hate Jews, right? And I thought to myself, I sized him up, I'm like, I can definitely outrun this dude. That's no big deal, right? And then I was like, oh, I'm here with 20 cops. I am totally cool. It's all good, right? And then on a deeper level, I thought, here is a man who can't control what he has to say, right? Here is a man who doesn't have the ability to stop, I can say plenty of things about people I hate. I know not, right? So I run this program and we do it quarterly. I just ran my first online version the week after the election with about 40 cops and DAs from around the country. My gut says 60 to 80% of them voted for President Trump. In case it's not clear to you, I did not vote for President Trump. I just want to be clear, right? And it was a very hard room to teach, right? But I believe that the work the invitation for us is to be crossing these lines. And I could see, even in people who voted differently than me, connected with Glide values of unconditional love, of seeing human beings struggling with issues, and was really moved. So I run this program, the police training. That's chunk 2. And chunk number 3 is that I take a group of 100 plus people every year to Montgomery, Alabama. My mom came with us a year ago. There's someone named Brian Stevenson. Does anyone not know who Brian Stevenson is? Anyone not know Brian Stevenson? So I'm going to just say this. Brian Stevenson is going to be your new justice boyfriend. I think he's probably the most righteous person alive in America today. Before you go to sleep tonight, you should watch his TED Talk. Before Passover, you should read his book, Just Mercy, Bryan Stevenson. And before the end of the year, you should send a check. And when COVID is over and you're vaccinated, you should get your tushies to Alabama. Brian, the Equal Justice Initiative gets people who are wrongly convicted off of death row. Okay, people who are usually guilty of nothing else than being Black in the South, who are set to be executed but actually did nothing. Right? My mom heard, and last year I heard again this year, a guy named Anthony Ray Hinton. You should read his book called The Sun Does Shine. Anthony Ray Hinton was sat on death row 100 yards away from the room where they execute people, heard dozens of people be executed from his chamber, was set to be executed. He actually was an innocent man. He actually didn't do anything, right? When he was in prison when his mother died, right? He did nothing. In the movie Just Mercy, you see the actual footage of him getting out of jail. Brian Stevenson does this work. About 3 years ago, the Equal Justice Initiative opened up a museum called the Legacy Museum in Montgomery that connects the dots from slavery, that tells the history of how Africans got to America and the systemic racism and systemic systems of slavery, and connects those dots to San Quentin and to mass incarceration. And Brian says slavery didn't end in 1865, right? It just took on new forms. So if you extrapolate from that and think about what I saw inside San Quentin, the racial makeup of San Quentin versus Marin County, or if you think of the makeup of the street in front of Glide, where 40% of unsheltered folks are African American versus 4% of the city, it's just slavery continuing. Right? We have not healed those wounds from slavery. So we built out this justice pilgrimage to Alabama because I'm just turned 52. My mom, don't wish her happy birthday later, just 3 days ago, she turned 38, okay? Or if you flip those numbers around, she turned 83, but don't tell anyone, okay? I'm here for a short window of time. The Jews have more safety, have more money, have more power than we've ever had. America has been so good to us, better than any country ever has. I want to use my power as a straight white male Jew, and I want to summon the Jewish power in this town to actually, and the power in America to heal America from these wounds that we have not. And I believe until we talk about the worst things that have happened on this soil, until we talk about slavery, until we talk about why are most of the Black folks in LA historically in South Central and in Watts? And why are there very few Black folks in Tarzana and Woodland Hills? Okay, why, right? Until we have those conversations, right? I don't think we can heal. And so we built out this justice pilgrimage. I brought Brian Stevenson to speak to my congregation in Marin 9 years ago, and he talked about this museum. I'm like, I got to go to the opening, got to go. And we went, we thought we were going to take 10 people from Glide, and we ended up taking 85 people to the opening. On top of the museum, there's a memorial that remembers 4,400 known African-American victims of lynching, okay? Black folks who, over the past 300 years, who were brutalized, who were murdered and strung from trees for reasons such as registering to vote, for reasons such as white kids were throwing rocks at them and you chastised them for throwing rocks at you. So it is the most haunting, potent, and perfect architecture I've ever been in. And it shatters you, as it should. And I think from this place of being shattered, when we allow our hearts to be shattered by these stories, that's when we can begin to heal. I can't imagine, like if you were a dignitary and you go to the state of Israel, you are not allowed to leave the state of Israel without going to Yad Vashem, right? You cannot understand the necessity of a Jewish state until you realize that a third of our people were incinerated within 12 years, right? I believe that we can't understand America and everything we're dealing with today until we look at the American equivalent of Yad Vashem head on, with cajones, with chutzpah, straight on. And I think that's our work. And I would say to you, beautiful souls, Valley, many of you in the Valley, I know the Novaks, left the Valley and don't care about you all anymore and moved up to Ventura, but maybe we'll pull them back one day, we'll see, right? But you beautiful souls, you guys have time, you guys have an iPad, some of you have some shekels, some of you have a lot of shekels. Like in the remaining time, our work is to heal this broken country of ours and to use our power. And maybe I'll close with this image. And I'll close with a story, then an image. Sorry, I'm a rabbi and I can't stop talking, right? So 2 weeks after I started at Glide, I was commuting from my house on a hill in Marin County where I looked out, the deer pranced by my beautiful house and white mountain bikers mountain biked up the hill, and I commuted to Ellis Street. And I opened the door of my minivan and I saw dozens of people splayed out on the street. I didn't know if they were alive or dead. I saw people injecting drugs for the first time in my life. I saw human feces everywhere because not in a city with more billionaires per capita than any city on the planet, we've not figured out how to build enough bathrooms for people to go to the potty and have some privacy, right? Again, mind you, mostly people of color. And I'm walking through and I'm walking towards Glide and I see a 65-year-old man sitting on a milk crate, staring out into space, drooling all over himself. I'm like, shit, I'm not gonna make it. This is gonna crush me. So I go up to the third floor and I go into Rita Shimon's office, a 70-year-old African-American woman who had been Glide's executive director for 18 years. And I look Rita in the eye and I'm like, yo, Rita, I'm not gonna make it, man. Look at this, this is terrible. It's crushing me. There's a story of the guy in the milk crate, and Rita looks at me. She's like, I know, Michael, I know sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes I got to go get a drink, man. It is just hard. Sometimes I need to walk out of the Tenderloin. And then she flipped it. She said, how do you know, Michael, that when you look into that man's eyes, you're not looking into the eyes of the face of God? Right? So I kid you not, that dude, I walk past 3-4 times a week. I walk past the face of God 3 to 4 times a week. When the first round of fires were happening 2 years ago, actually the fires that burned down Camp Newman, okay? And the air quality was like 7,000 and like you could practically get cancer by looking out your window, let alone walking outside. Glide was handing out masks to everyone. I walked past the face of God in my like N95 mask. He did not yet have a mask. And he said, I don't think he's well enough to direct it at me, but he just, as I walk past the face of God, he just goes, fuck you, right? And my mystical sense is like, I think the Holy One is looking at us and saying, we've messed this up. We've messed up the planet. We've messed up poverty. We've messed up race. We've messed up this very tender gift of democracy. And it's our work. And so the last story I'll tell is about Psalm 147, verse 3, which calls God the healer of shattered hearts. Right? You and me, who are created B'Tselem Elohim, created in the image of God, are created in the image of God who heals broken hearts. When you think about each of the times your heart has been broken, the capacity for it to heal, I think we're here to heal America's shattered heart. And I think we, maybe unlike anyone in America's history, have risen. And I think we have a choice to like, are we going to be more like Pharaoh or more like God? And I'm like, holy people of Temple Judea, let's do the work. So maybe I'll close there and say, lastly, thanks for the privilege of learning with you. And I really hope that we get to meet face to face in front of Glide one day.
Amen ve'amen I mean, I have no words. Thank you for sharing. Extremely powerful, extremely touching. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi.
Do you have a moment
Bring it
for
on.
some questions? Feel free, maybe I can field the chat box. Feel free to raise your hand, and you have the capability to unmute yourself. So Rabbi Lezak, maybe if you want to take people raising their hands, and I can look at the chat box.
I'm on it. Gail, go for it.
Great.
Oh, I have to go first. That makes me very nervous. Okay. I was wondering if you had read this book called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. I'm in the middle of reading it right now. It's very hard to read. It's not an easy read. But the interesting thing about it is that she brings in the history of the caste system in other parts of the world. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And compares it to what we have here in the United States. And I think as a Jew, it's very easy to relate to how the system that we live with now got laid down in our country and how it continues until today, even though we try to pretend like it's not there. So I was just wondering if you had heard about it or read it, if anybody else.
I think I've got a very deep bookshelf of justice books that I can recommend to you. The second book, up until Caste came out, I think Caste is at the top right now. I have read it. You should I'll give you a many list of things to read and listen to. You should listen to Isabel Wilkerson on the On Being podcast.
On the what is it?
It's called On Being. The author of Caste is Isabel Wilkerson.
Right.
The book she wrote before this is called The Warmth of Other Suns, which tells the story of three people who journeyed in the Great Migration. Of 6 million, hold this fact for a minute, Jewish ears, 6 million African Americans picked up and fled the Jim Crow South from 1910 to 1970 and ended up in places like Harlem and Detroit and Chicago and Watts, right, and Oakland. Why are there a ton of Black folks in Harlem and Oakland and Watts? Because they were fleeing white supremacist terrorism, right? They were on the run. Their lives were threatened. 6 million of them left. The Warmth of Other Suns profiles that. You should read it to understand this and to understand our cities. And Caste is searingly powerful. It haunts me, right? The story that haunts me the most, right? And thank you, Gail, for bringing it up. And she tells the story about people living outside of Sachsenhausen, right? The death camp in what is modern day Czech Republic, right? Which I've been to in 1991. People, normal citizens who were living outside of Sachsenhausen would have ashes falling on their lawns from the crematorium, right? Like I just want to cry, right? Just hold that. Fucking ashes of Jewish bodies landing on your lawn. And they didn't do anything, right? I feel that every day I walk through the streets of the Tenderloin. This is fucking slavery in 2021, right? It's alive and well and thriving. And I have got power. I got shelter. I got 2 cars. What am I doing?
Right.
So yeah, you got to read Caste. The reason I say you got to come on pilgrimage to Alabama with us, and we took 25 leaders from UCSF with us this year, the second most powerful economic engine in San Francisco. They have 30,000 employees and pump $7 billion into the economy. The reason we brought them with us because we said we want Alabama to eat at their stomach lining. We want it to haunt them. We want them to have nightmares about what they learn. And then when they return to their seats of power, to use their power to bring truth and justice and reconciliation to their institution and to the city, right? It should haunt you. But it shouldn't haunt you and then you run under your bed. It should haunt you and then you should rise up and work. Eileen, go for it.
The other point that Isabel Wilkerson made that was inescapable was that the Nazis took notes on how the Americans set up slavery.
Yeah, they learned from us.
Yeah, so they delighted or They
Yeah.
created the cruelty, the excess cruelty.
Yeah. I mean, let me just connect the dots for a minute. I'm standing at the opening of the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. Underneath, if you haven't seen the architecture, you should look it up. You should go one day. But there are 800 steel boxes suspended from the ceiling, each with the name of a different county in America. And each of those steel boxes that look like a steel coffin have the names etched in it of people who were lynched in those counties. Okay, hold that for a minute. 4,400 names. I'm standing underneath them the morning that this opens. A small group of us from Glide leaders are there. Sweet Honey and the Rock sing. Brian Stevenson speaks. Reverend Jesse Jackson speaks. When we're done, I bring my 3 daughters up. And I go to Reverend Jackson. I said, Reverend Jackson, I'm Michael Lezak. I'm a rabbi at Glide in San Francisco. He looks at me and he says, oh, say hi to Cecil for me. I had no idea he knew Reverend Cecil Williams. And then he looks at me. And he goes, Rabbi, don't forget they did this to your people too. Don't forget about Leo Frank. Right? I didn't remember who Leo Frank was. 20-ish-year-old Jew in the 1920s in Atlanta who was wrongly convicted of killing a white girl, was thrown in jail. Crazy white mob broke into the jail, took him out of jail, took him to the Jewish neighborhood, brutalized him, strung him up from a tree. That's the seeds of the ADL. The ADL was founded after Leo Frank was killed. But the sermon I gave at Glide the next Sunday morning was this. Here I am in front of an iconic leader of the civil rights movement, in a site remembering trauma and terror of African Americans being killed. And that leader looks at the Jew and says, your trauma is connected to my trauma, right? It's not different. Like we often get caught up in what a friend of mine calls the genocide Olympics. Oh, we had more and they were worse to us and they were terrible, right? They've been terrible to all kinds of folks on the margins. So I believe that when we crack open our hearts and where Jewish pain meets Black pain meets Latinx pain meets LGBTQ pain, that's where we grow America. Al, I've got it as Al. Your name is Al, but I don't think you're Al. You're muted. What's your name?
My name is Sarah.
Go, Sarah.
I'm Al's wife.
Say hi to Al.
He's right here.
I'm here too.
I just wanted to tell you how special it is to have you speak to us today. And all the wonderful things you do, but I'm going to ask you a very practical question.
Go.
Who funds all this?
All of me?
Who funds the whole
Glide.
project?
When you say, is it
Glide.
the Rabbi Michael Lezak project at Glide? Who funds all of Glide?
Yes.
It's a whole combination of forces. For our harm reduction work and for our meals, we get some government funding. We have foundations around the country that support our work and a ton of individual donors. Yeah.
I mean, are you online for donations or do you?
What's that?
Are you online for donations?
Go to glide.org in the upper right corner.
Okay.
And send your money to the Center for Social Justice.
I have a question too. I'm
Go.
out. Okay, well, in terms of hepatitis C, which I deal with a lot too, what do you, and it's in incarcerated people, it's enormous. It's a really terrible problem. In the prisons,
Yes, sir.
etc., they get out and they infect all kinds of people too.
Yes, sir.
So what are you doing in terms of trying to get them under treatment?
I can give you like a 3% of a good answer, and I can connect you with people who can give you the direct answer. At Glide, our harm reduction team, which stands in our lobby 7 days of the week and gives out clean needles, are testing people, free tests for HIV and Hep C. We also have 2 vans that go out to 50 homeless encampments every day with hot food, with clean needles. We test people for HIV and Hep C. I think, and this is where I'm a rabbi and not a doctor, I think there's become like an easiest treatment for Hep C recently. Yes. Like,
Yes.
Yeah. So I remember reading those posters on the walls in Glide. We are like connected to like the best medicine in the Bay and delivering that to unsheltered folks who do not have it. We're connected to health clinics all around there helping people. That's the best answer I can give. If you want more than that, email me and I'll get you more information.
What is the website of Glide again?
Glide.org. I'll put it in the chat for you all. GLIDE.org.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you. Mrs. Lezak.
Rabbi Lezak, but I'm really talking to the people on the screen. As Michael said, I did go to Alabama with him. And just to talk about it, hear about it, I have two reactions right now. I have three. One, I'm teary. The other, I'm shaking. And the other is, once this scourge is over and we have our vaccinations, you should find your way to Alabama. Whether you go with Michael, which is an incredible, incredible trip, or you find yourself there on your own. That memorial where Michael talks about the hanging
Boxes, just call them.
hanging boxes reminded me of seeing the shoes at Yad Vashem, all those little bitty baby shoes. It is I'm really choked up over it. It's an experience that I think is definitely worthwhile. So take yourself there, and Yasher Koach, Rabbi.
Thank you, Mother. I'm going to push it even further. You're all going to get vaccinated, God willing, in the coming months. You're going to set up meetings and family reunions and hug the bejuices out of your kids and grandkids. You're going to want to go to Paris and London. I'm going to just say this on the service of America, of your grandchildren's future, if you have them, right? Next family reunion, I'm serious, in Alabama. I'll be your concierge. I'll plot it out for you. But you should take people. You should invest in that economy, and you should invest in your grandkids' souls, understanding that. Maybe even before Paris. And I want to go to Paris, okay? But you got to go. You got to go.
Any other final thoughts? Rabbi Lezak, thank you. You have moved my soul, if I can talk on behalf of everyone on this screen. And maybe we do a joint TJVillage glide trip to Alabama when it's safe in a post-COVID world. I'm seeing some thumbs up. I will connect with you. I would love to get a list of books. You mentioned a TED Talk, a movie, that we can all further our learning and further learn from this talk. So
absolutely.
Are there any final comments? Thank you.
I want to say one, firstly, thank you all for all the holy work you guys regularly do. I want to offer my blessing to you in the midst of COVID to keep your dukes squarely up until we get you vaccinated. We need you all healthy and safe. And it is an increasingly dangerous time with this new strand of the virus. So please stay safe, because the Jews and your city and your state and the country need your fire. And thanks for all the holy work you do, and for loving your synagogue and loving my mom.
And that we do. I wanted to mention two quick things. 2 weeks from today, we are having another wonderful, wonderful program that we're very excited about. This one is Thursday, January 28th at 4 p.m. We will be hearing from Dr. Rafe Sonnenschein. We will be joined by other synagogue villages from across the LA area. So please mark your calendars, join us. He will be giving us a post-election, where are we, where have we come from, where are we going? The path ahead is what that program is called. So please join us for that. And a week from tomorrow, Friday, January 22nd at 5 p.m., we have our pre-Shabbat service schmooze on Zoom. So look for that link where we can join together again in this holy community that we are creating. So again, thank you, Rabbi Lezak. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you all for joining us. Be well, stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you later this month.
Thanks, everyone. Have a beautiful day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Take care.